Good morning and welcome to Trevor Phillips on Sunday, live from Labour conference in Brighton. I hope you haven't gotten rid of those flared jeans and the lava lamp because the 1970s and 80s seem to be back. Lockdown made beards OK for hipsters. I'm still working on the afro. Now we have queues for petrol, a government reversing at speed on its immigration policy to let foreign HGV drivers and turkey pluckers back into the country. And here at Labour Party conference, the left and the unions have a moderate leader on the rack again. Keir Starmer arrived in Brighton hoping to force through a change to the party's rules that would block a far-left challenge for the leadership. He failed. So, load to chew over with your spam fritters and Black Forest Gatto. Pop the Matthias Rosé in the fridge. On our menu this morning, I'm joined by Angela Rayner, the party's deputy leader. The government pledges action to address queues at the petrol pump. I'll ask the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, whether he has a grip on the supply crisis. The former Shadow Chancellor, John McDonnell, will be here to tell us whether the spirit of Corbynism is alive and well in the Labour Party. We'll speak to the General Secretary of Unison, McAnea, about Labour's relations with the trades unions and what can be done to stop a winter crisis in the health and social care sectors. And the former Labour Cabinet Minister, Charles Clarke, who experienced his party's wilderness years in the 1980s and the triumphant landslide of New Labour, will give us his assessment on how far away this Labour leadership is from power. First, the deputy leader of the Labour Party. Good morning, Mr. Rayner.
Good morning.
If we can get past yesterday's business for the moment, did Keir Starmer talk to you about his proposed rule changes before the conference?
Of course, yeah, and he spoke to the trade unions and many others about the proposals that he felt that we needed to have a conversation about. And that's normal in conference period. We're not happy unless we're talking about a rule amendment, a reference back or a compositing meeting. That's just the normal hustle and tussle of what we do at conference. So, yeah, you know, he wanted that consultation, he wanted that discussion. We had our NEC, which passed and approved some proposals that are going to go to conference floor, and that's how we do things in the Labour Party.
So, another Labour Party tradition, the two of you clearly didn't disagree because you put forward a separate amendment to his proposal at the NEC.
Well, I'm not going to discuss what happened at the private meeting of the NEC.
But that is the case.
But one of the things that I'm concerned of, and I always have been, and I've stood on the platform, is that we are able to diversify our candidates and the way in which we, are able to, choose people as councillors, as mayors, as leaders, and as myself as deputy leader. I wanted to make sure that, for example, we're able to have more women on the ballot and that we're able to have more black, Asian and minority ethnic candidates on the ballot. So my concerns around that is to make sure that we don't inadvertently create a problem for ourselves when we actually want to have a broad base of candidates on that ballot so that people can have...
But if the two of you were talking about it so amicably, that means he came into this conference basically ignoring what you wanted. And the slogan for the party conference says together and the future. How are people expected to believe that you and Keir Starmer are together for the future when you can't even apparently agree on the present?
Well, we did agree. We are in agreement.
Why did you feel the need to amend what he put forward to the NEC?
It was a tidying up of what was the same thing that we were both trying to achieve. So it wasn't we call them friendly amendments in the movement, is where you actually are just trying to tidy up the wording, because sometimes you want to put something in and that's your aim, but the unintended consequences sometimes have, the ability to disenfranchise. And that was what we were doing, That's what my concerns were, is that we continue to make sure that we have a broad, diverse group of candidates that come forward so that people can vote for that.
All right, one more piece of conference business. Chair of the conference, Margaret Beckett, when she opened yesterday, talked about civility. So did the General Secretary, David Evans, when he made his speech. You said last night, we cannot get any worse than a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynist, absolute pile of banana republic Etonian piece of scum. Is that the kind of civility that the Starmer-Rayner Labour Party envisages?
Well, look, that was post-watershed, as we'd say, with a group of activists at an event last night. And what I was trying to get across, and this is and it is my passionate way in which I do it, is the anger and frustration that people feel when you have a Prime Minister who has said things and not apologised for them that are racist, that are misogynistic, that are homophobic, that has given billions of pounds of taxpayers' money to their mates and literally wasted that money at a time when they're cutting universal credit, plunging families into crisis and the cost of living is going up. Then my passion was about, look, we can't sit on the sidelines here. We have to get organised. And I was speaking to a group of activists to say, you've got to get that fire in your belly. The reason I was so upset about what the government did, especially on the school meals, was because I was a child that was hungry. And I was a child that needed that support. And I remember Tory ministers at the time when I was 16 saying women like me, girls like me at 16, were just getting pregnant to get council houses. So when the Prime Minister uses language like calling Muslim women letterboxers, that has an effect. And the fact that he hasn't apologised for that, then for me, I don't think he's fit to govern. And I was saying to a group of activists late at night, get your fire in your belly. We cannot sit on the sidelines anymore. We've got to get into power because we've got to make things better for ordinary working people in this country.
Look, we can all get carried away, but you talked about a bunch of them. You talked about Tories in general.
No, let me be clear. I'm talking about members of the Cabinet. So you've got the Home Secretary who has bullied senior civil servants, who breached the ministerial code, had private meetings without civil servants present, and nothing's been done about that. We've had other Cabinet members that have said appalling things. So I think it's this government...
We're being quite specific about who the scum are, or do you want to give me a list of names?
Well, I think anyone who leaves children hungry during a pandemic and can give billions of pounds to their mates on WhatsApp, I think that was pretty scummy. Now, that is a phrase, and let me contextualise it, it's a phrase that you would hear very often in northern working-class towns, that we'd even say it jovially to other people. You know, we say it's a scummy thing to do. And that, to me, is my street language, as you would say, about actually it's pretty appalling that people think that's OK to do.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to get into an argument about you. You pride yourself on being plain speaking, and that's all fine. But would you like to take this opportunity, perhaps to apologise to the 14,000 people in Ashton-under-Lyme who voted for a Tory and the Tory scum that you describe, by suggesting, and now you're suggesting, that somehow their choice, they made a choice to be racist, homophobic and scummy?
Yeah, let me be clear. I am not saying that anyone who voted for the Conservatives are racist, scummy and homophobic. I'm saying the Prime Minister...
So do you just want to... Let's just deal with it. Why don't you apologise to those who voted Conservative in Ashton-under-Lyme? And by the way, the millions who voted Conservative in those red wall seats.
Sure, I'm saying, and I'm very clear, I'm not saying anybody who voted Conservative are those things. I'm saying the Prime Minister has said those things and has acted in that way. And if the Prime Minister wants to apologise and remove himself from those comments that he's made that are homophobic, that are racist, that are misogynistic, then I will apologise for calling him scummy.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm very serious.
You could just deal with it. You could just deal with it very simply by saying, I'm sorry about this.
Honestly, I'm really serious about this because I feel really passionate about the fact that when you've got a Prime Minister of the country that thinks it's OK to use the language that he's used, then that is appalling.
He hasn't called you or Keir Starmer scum. Listen, you called him scum. Is that the civility that we're talking about now? Because
I've said that I'm very clear that if the Prime Minister wants to remove himself from those comments, I'm quite happy to apologise for calling him scum.
All right.
If he wants to remove himself from those comments, the racist, misogynistic, homophobic comments that he's made, they're all documented, very offensive comments, then I will apologise to him personally for calling him scum. If he wants to say that he apologises and doesn't mean the comments that he's made in the past, I'll happily do that. OK, I'm sure he's watching and he'll drop you a line. Let's talk about policy. You plan to legislate to compel employers and unions to talk to each other. What happens when the unions and the employers disagree? Well, they go through the disputes procedure. There is a formal process for them to do that. You know, it's well documented. But what this does actually, by having collective bargaining and having that negotiation, often they come to agreement because employers and trade unions have one common aim, and that's the business to flourish, because without the business, you don't have the membership and you don't have the workers.
So what's new about this policy? Employers and trade unions talk all the time.
Well, what's new about this policy, of course, in those sectors where we have collective bargaining, and I talk about the social care sector, and many social care workers now do not have the mechanism for fair pay agreements, for example, and therefore I talk about how that undercuts their wages. 600,000 care workers are not paid the minimum wage. They don't get, you know, I talked about in my speech about how they don't get travel time. So I really want to increase the standards in care so that people who receive care get the best care. But it's great for business as well, because staff retention is a problem. We know we've got vacancies, skills that we lose when you have to skill people up again to do that job. Actually, it works better when you pay people better.
I get all that, but you've christened this the New Deal for working people. Let me remind you, 2017, Labour manifesto said that Labour would repeal the Trade Union Act, roll out sector collective bargaining, raise the minimum wage to at least £10. The 2019 Labour manifesto said that you would roll out sectoral collective bargaining across the country, bringing workers and employers together to agree legal minimum standards on a wide range of issues that every employer would have to adopt. What exactly is new about the New Deal for working people?
Well, Trevor, I'm consistent, if nothing else, to be fair. And then on top of that, there's a suite of other things that we announced. So we've done a lot of detailed work on this. The green paper that I produced yesterday, published, has things like, you know, rights from day one for all workers, talking about a single status for workers, so that we have the parental leave, that we have rights for unfair dismissal from day one, and that people can get that support. I talked about flexible working. People during the pandemic have worked more flexibly than ever before, home working and other ways of working, and I think we should roll that out and have an opportunity for people to have more flexibility, and employers will benefit from that in terms of all the different sectors that we have across the whole of the economy.
Yeah, look, you're essentially recycling a policy. OK, you can call it new if you like. This morning, the leader has said that he effectively wants to remove the tax advantages that private schools have. This sort of feels a bit like warmed-up Corbynism of 2017 and 2019. What is different about the Keir Starmer, Angela Rayner leadership from what was offered in 2019?
Well, some of our values stay the same, Trevor, throughout. That's the Labour Party. That's what we've always been. We've always been a party of social justice and about tackling inequality. Inequality in the UK has grown under the Conservatives. What we're saying is that it's about priorities. We shouldn't be subsidising private education when you've got so many young people now who haven't got those opportunities. That what we're saying is that money should go back into supporting young people who need that support. And it's about priorities, and it's about showing the difference between what a Conservative government does, like that on the issue of the tax hike, on the issue of universal credit, and what we would do completely different. And our values are about tackling inequality, not just saying it, but tackling it.
Let's deal with the issue, difference between talking the talk and walking the walk. Is it embarrassing that of the four biggest parties in Parliament now, the Labour Party is the only one that's never had a woman leader?
Well, I did an interview recently at the weekend and described Keir as a feminist, and he is, and you know...
But he's not a woman as far as I know.
He's not a woman, no, but you know, it's about how you bring people forward and about people putting their names forward. I hope we'll have a female leader one day. I'm absolutely committed to that, supporting somebody going forward or taking that issue forward. But Keir has been very strong on supporting women, and I can only say as his deputy that the first conversation I had with Keir, which was a very serious one, because if you remember, Boris Johnson was very poorly at the time, and I had COVID. And Keir's first conversation with me when we were elected leader and deputy was, Angela, if I get COVID, if something happens to me, I need to put the mechanisms in place for you to be able to take over. That is a sign of respect for my role and my status in the organisation. So I think it's important that, and it's an important point here, men can be feminists and support women in their career choices and support them, whether in the workplace, as yourself and others, or actually by supporting them soft or hard in terms of how they can bring them forward. But that's an important role for men as well as women putting themselves forward as well.
Let's just deal very quickly, if we may, and last question, in supporting women. How can women in Britain trust Labour to support women when Labour cannot even guarantee the safety and gain the confidence of its own woman MPs? Rosie Duffield is not here because she does not feel safe.
Yeah, and that is a concern of mine, that Rosie didn't feel safe to attend conference. But let me say something about Trevor, because it's really serious and it crosses all political parties. What I have been shocked by, especially my female colleagues, and that's Conservative female MPs as well, is the level of misogynistic abuse they get. I've had death threats, so many of them. I thought it was just because I'd become deputy leader of the Labour Party that it upped on a scale, nothing. But speaking to colleagues across the House, the level of abuse, is disgusting, and it has to stop. And you know, Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker of the House, spoke about this as well. He made it a big key issue at his G7 meeting. We need to make sure that our politics means that we can have the discourse that I have with Boris and others, that's right, but abuse at that level is completely unacceptable, and Rosie deserves our full support and protection against that, and she would get that if she'd have come to conference. We would have risk assessed and made sure that she had every bit of support that she needed to be here, and anybody who abuses Rosie Duffield, who is a member of the Labour Party, would go through our formal complaints procedure, and I'd expect a robust response on it.
Angela Rayner, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Now, queues at the petrol station may be annoying for drivers, but for governments, they spell big trouble. And if there's also a hint that the turkeys may not be ready for Christmas, the jitters begin to turn into panic. The Prime Minister returned from New York, trumpeting the end of a glorious summer, but he and his ministers could now be facing a winter of discontent. I'm joined now by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps.
Morning.
Grant Shapps, is it fair to scold motorists when panic buying when all they're trying to do is to make sure they can get to work tomorrow morning?
Yeah, and I think the important thing to know is within the country, at the 6 refineries and 47 storage facilities, there's plenty of fuel. There's no shortage of the fuel within the country. So the most important thing is actually that if people carry on as they normally would and fill up their cars when they normally would, then you won't have queues and you won't have shortages at the pump either. So it's not like we don't have the fuel in the country. We do need to just ensure that people are filling up when they need to fill up, rather than thinking, I better go and fill up now just in case I need it next week or the week after.
You've been telling people that all week, and it hasn't really made any difference. And actually, people are queuing up. And in fact, what they're now doing is driving past empty stations which do not have petrol. So the reassurances that it's all going to be OK absolutely conflicts with people's actual experience. So let me ask you again, is it enough just to tell people don't panic buy when they know that they cannot get petrol in their cars and get to work tomorrow morning?
No, I think government has to also provide the reassurance as well. Otherwise, as you say, people will say, well, I can see what's happening with my own eyes. And that's why this morning we've done a big package of measures there, short, medium and long term, to help alleviate the issues, which actually fundamentally come down to one thing. Coronavirus has created massive shortages of lorry drivers, tanker drivers throughout the world, and coronavirus stopped us from testing them. So we couldn't bring new drivers into the marketplace during the lockdown. So what we've done is doubled the capacity, brought the army in, which we've announced today, in order to carry out more testing. So those are short-term things. Visas as well, in order to plug the gap between here and Christmas. And then medium-term, boot camps to train more people into what is now a much better paid market, apprenticeships. And I'm appealing today for 1 million drivers who have HGV licenses, some of whom have left the market, to come back in, attracted perhaps by those higher wages. And in the long term, better truck stops, better pay and conditions in an industry which has traditionally been undercut and hasn't been paying the salaries that would attract enough people to the industry. So a big package of measures, which I hope will help to reassure people that actually we've got plenty of fuel. If everyone buys it as they normally would, we won't be getting queues at the petrol stations as well.
Well, look, let's deal with long term in a moment, but let's talk about the short term. You are issuing just 5,500 short-term visas for chicken pluckers and 5,000 for qualified HGV foreign drivers. The head of the European Haulage Association says, you haven't got a chance, mate. They are not going to come for that money. This is really not going to solve the problem, is it? There will not be turkeys for Christmas.
Well, look, I don't agree. In terms of the scale of the issue, there have been long-term systemic shortages.
The guy who represents all the haulage drivers you want to bring back, he's telling you the money is not enough. And by the way, our domestic haulage boss is saying we need 90,000. 5,000 barely a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, so Logistics UK, who are actually the UK's biggest haulage representative organisation, have very much welcomed the package this morning and do say that it's a significant package. It's not just, of course, those visas, which is very short term. It's also the big bottleneck is there are plenty of people who know how to drive a lorry, but where they need to get tested or retested, DVSA, that's the testing agency, has had this massive restriction. Now, you might say, why haven't you acted on that post-COVID? In fact, we have. We reopened that testing back in April. We've managed to double the capacity, partly by using freedoms that we've got outside of the EU to change the way the driving tests work, to get more capacity, to get more tests through. Bringing in the army will be a very significant assistance there as well, and that way we can get more people tested and onto the roads. So the visas is only one element of it. Testing is very much front and centre, and then of course there's appeal for people who can already drive to sort of to realise actually the salaries now for driving lorries has gone up tremendously. We think that's a good thing. We think there have been too many years of people being undercut to do a decent day's work, and the fact that people will get paid properly in this industry is something which will help it in the long term, and it's actually what's required to have this industry sustainable in the long term without constantly having to import labour, which is what's happened up till now.
Can I put to you why people in the industry are pretty cross about this? They say it's all too little too late. Even in the press release you yourself put out, the boss of the Food and Drink Confederation says this is something UK food and drink manufacturers have asked for over the last few months. What they're basically saying is that they've been telling you for months this is going to happen, and you did nothing.
Not true. We have already doubled the testing.
Well, it's in your press release. I'm not making it up. It's in your press release.
As I say, we've already doubled the capacity, so it's just not true that nothing's been done. And let's not pretend this is sort of, you know, some UK-specific problem. It's not. In Europe, some of the, for example, in Poland, the shortage is 123,000 drivers. So there isn't just one simple, and you pointed out yourself, there isn't one simple solution to this. But we have, despite having had shortages, managed to ensure that petrol was still getting to petrol stations, food still getting to the shops. I'm afraid there has been some pretty irresponsible briefing out by one of the road haulage associations, which has helped to spark a crisis. And that's very, very unhelpful. It's counterproductive. And I know that they're desperate to have more European drivers undercutting British salaries, and that's been their ask all along. We actually think that, you know, it's important that this country can train people, that people can do a proper day's work, that they're paid properly for that work, and that the long-term solution cannot be undercutting British salaries and having a constant cycle, a vicious cycle, where you never get out of that problem of not being able to train people here and employ them here on decent salaries.
Isn't it, forgive me, Transport Secretary, isn't it a little shabby to be blaming everybody else when actually this arises out of a choice you yourself made? On August the 5th, you wrote to a group of MPs saying, and I'm quoting from your letter, I do not support using foreign labour to tackle a long-standing issue in the haulage industry. You were very specific that you did not want this to happen. You made a choice. Isn't it a little shabby now to be basically saying, oh, it's everybody else's fault, when you made that choice?
No, just once again, let me say, I do not believe, as I said in that letter, that the long-term solution to Britain's shortages of HGV drivers is to say the only choice we have is to import European drivers, undercut British salaries, and not skill up people to do the job here in the United Kingdom. So that's absolutely right. I also recognise, I'm completely pragmatic about this, that we need to ensure that people are reassured now that this rather sort of manufactured situation has been created. Because, as I say, there's enough petrol in the country. It's if everyone goes and buys it on the same day.
Hang on, just for a second. When you say this manufactured, when you say this manufactured situation. Manufactured by whom? How?
Well, as I say, there was a meeting that took place about 10 days ago.
It was made up?
A private meeting in which one of the haulage associations decided to leak the details to the media, and that has created, as we have seen, quite a large degree of concern. People naturally react to those things. The good news is, as I say, there is plenty of fuel. The bad news is, if everyone carries on buying it when they don't need it, then you would continue to have queues. Sooner or later, everyone's cars will be more or less filled up, and there won't be anywhere else to put fuel. It's not like, say, the toilet roll crisis at the beginning of the pandemic, where people could sort of stockpile it. It's very difficult to do that with fuel. And so it will come to an end. But we just appeal to people to be sensible, fill up when you normally would. We've got this big package in place today in order to help alleviate the pressure, and we ask people to do their part. Now we've got this package in place doing its part.
Some people in your own party are pretty unhappy about this. What they're saying is you've rolled over on driver shortages and relaxed immigration rules. So when you next get an appeal from farmers about fruit rotting in the fields, or hospitality bosses about the fact that they can't hire chefs and waiters, and care homeowners about lack of staff, are you all going to roll over again?
Well, it very much supports the point I'm making, which is we don't want to be in a situation where we are not training people here. And in each of these cases, we need to look to the sectors involved to make sure we are, or they are, training up the next generations. And in haulier drivers, for example, it's 99% male. It's average age 55. There is a systemic problem that the government is very keen to work with the sector on, but the sector will also need to help recruit people in and train people and help improve standards in those sectors, so that it's more pleasant to drive. And then in other sectors, as you say, there are already schemes that enable people to come in to pick fruits. It's a seasonal role. But yes, broadly speaking, as you suggest, we believe that we should be training people in this country, and that people should be able to earn a decent wage in this country. And that is absolutely at the heart of the government's approach, which is why, even with the visa to drive lorries, it's limited until Christmas.
OK, the deputy leader of the Labour Party had a colourful description of Conservatives at a party yesterday evening, and she spoke to me this morning, and she made clear that what she really had in mind was not all Conservative voters, or indeed all Conservatives, just the Cabinet. Are you OK to be described as scum?
I just see it absolutely appalling. There's just no place in public life for that sort of language, that sort of behaviour. I saw that she had described herself as being somebody who wanted to see a kinder kind of politics back in 2019. I'm very sorry that seems to have disappeared. I watched your interview and literally wondered to myself, is she talking about me here? I'm just not clear. And I think it would have been...
I was talking about really, you.
I wasn't sure, but I think it'd be befitting if she actually just apologised rather than talked around the subject.
We're coming up to COP26. Just one quick point, because this is really in your bailiwick. if we want to get to net zero, we are going to have to stop people using fossil fuels. Will you be recommending to the Chancellor that in his autumn statement he raises fuel duty?
Well, as you'd expect me to say in his autumn statement, he'll have a lot of decisions to take, and I'm not going to preempt his budget. But
I'm just asking this because this is your job. Would you say to him, "Here's something you could do"? Offer him an option.
As I say, he'll have to come up with decisions about his autumn budget. But what I can tell you is actually a lot of people are already switching to electric. And actually, because of the crisis this weekend, I was just checking the latest numbers. There are 700,000 cars in Britain today with plugs on the end of them, who will not therefore be involved in the petrol shortage. A lot of people are already switching, and in 8 years' time, there's the end of the sale of pure petrol and diesel cars in any case. So that movement across is already taking place. We've got a very big transport decarbonisation plan in place, which actually helps to track us along that path to zero carbon in cars. And then critically, in the much harder to decarbonise parts of transport, which are ships, but planes in particular. And this country is leading the way, for example, with hydrogen aircraft being tested out at the moment.
Okay. Grant Shapps, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.
Now, Sir Keir Starmer's attempt to forge a new path for Labour got off to a pretty shaky start this weekend. And if anyone thought that the party's left-wingers would go without a fight, they've never met any of the Jeremy Corbyn fan club. In fact, the party's former leader let fly a couple of days ago, accusing the current leadership of propping up capitalism. To be clear, he thinks that's a bad thing. Let's see what his brother-in-arms, former Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, thinks. John McDonnell, you described Keir Starmer's essay published this week, The Road Ahead, as the Sermon on the Mount composed by a focus group. That's a bit disrespectful to your leader, isn't it?
Don't worry, Keir's a friend of mine. He can take it on the chin. I was trying to get across to him, look, we've got to go beyond banalities. We need real vision and policy programme now, and that's what this conference should all be about, the real concrete policies we're going to pursue.
Do you think that the Labour policy offer that's being made is familiar to you? I mean, I was talking to Rayner this morning, the attack on private schools. Frankly, the New Deal for Working People feels pretty much like a McDonnell deal for working people.
On the New Deal for Working People, Andy McDonnell, the Shadow Secretary of State for Employment, Andy's been working on it for nearly 3 years, 2.5 years at least. It's a great piece of work, and Lord John Hendy as well. Andy's fronted that, which is great. So a lot of it is building upon what we did. I think it needs to go a bit further in terms of pay levels, not the £10. I think it's £15 an hour we should be going. But my anxiety yesterday, and this is why I wrote a couple of pieces for the press this weekend, is that got drowned out by all this falling out over the constitutional rules of our party. We had really two good announcements this weekend. One was Andrew Rayner and Andy McDonnell's employment policy, but the other one was Lucy Howe's housing policy. Both terrific, both in the trajectory of what we've been doing over recent years. But that got completely drowned out by the shenanigans over our constitution, really.
Are you going to accept the compromise that has been reached on the rules? Is everybody going to go, OK, fine, we'll go with this? I
don't think people are happy still. On the Electoral College, Keir pushed that unnecessarily, got defeated. Then he's pushed this threshold for nominations from MPs for the next leader who goes on the ballot paper. He got defeated on that and that got amended. I don't think actually we need a change of the rules, but if it goes through, to be honest, we'll work with it. It won't prevent a left wing coming forward, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't think it's necessary. And I would oppose it this morning if I had a vote, definitely.
You would oppose it?
Yeah.
Do you think it's going to go through, by the way, today?
I think it'd be touch and go, to be honest. I can't predict that at all. Part of the problem is that we've had quite a number of CLP delegates excluded over the last few days. And again, that's an issue I'm worried about. So the CLP delegations have been weakened. I think they're the strongest in opposition because they want the members to have a full range of candidates to choose from when there's the next leadership election. And by the way, what's the rush about changing the rules for nominating a leader or voting for a leader? We're not going to have a leadership election, as far as I'm aware, unless people know something I don't.
I'm trying to get a sense, John McDonnell, of where you really are on Keir Starmer. Policy-wise, he seems to be doing all the things that you would have done and would feel happy with. Maybe there's a stumble here and there on the Constitution, but you should be happy with this guy.
He's a democratically elected leader. He won the election 18 months ago. That's the first point, so you have to respect that, and I have done. The second point is, on the constitutional changes, he never said a word about that when he stood for leader, and I think he should have done. If he was going to change our constitutional rules, he should have said it then. And that opens him up to charges of not being straight with people when he stood for this. So I'm worried about that. In terms of policy, we haven't heard much at all. So that's why this conference, I was urging him, concentrate on policy. Concentrate on getting that vision across, rather than dragging us through this mess of a rankle and argument about faction fighting over the rules.
I don't want to keep, as somebody said yesterday, wanging on about the Constitution. But do you go with the people who say that if he's going to bring forward this kind of thing, actually, and as you say, he didn't mention it in his run for leadership, that he should stand again?
I've said he should have gone back to the people. He should either consulted or stood
a new leadership election.
If necessary, but I said, look, why don't you follow what other leaders have done, gone through a proper consultation. Ed Miliband even had a special conference. Don't try and bounce the party like this. I want to get onto policy, and what I'm saying to him on policy, look at Biden. Look at Biden, a centrist leader, which was what Keir really is, but he's worked with the left and all wings of his party, and he's brought forward a radical political programme. Follow that path, and I think it'll take us back into government.
Do you think that the idea of bringing forward these rule changes speaks to something deeper? The sense that, and maybe I'm about to compliment you, the sense that the centre of the Labour Party has decided that actually the membership has changed quite decisively, and it can't trust the Labour Party's membership as it currently is, and therefore it needs to operate in a different way.
I think, look, you've struck a raw nerve there. That's quite right. I think there are some people, maybe around Keir as well, I don't think it's Keir himself, but there might be some people around Keir who have a pathological fear of democracy and of our members. Yet, look, we have a huge membership. Unfortunately, it's declining at the moment because people are getting a bit demoralised. But we have a huge membership. They reflect the wider community, you know, the doctors, the nurses, the people working in the public sector, lorry drivers and all the rest. Trust the people, that's what I'm saying to them. So don't have these shenanigans where you're trying to restrict the role of members. In fact, when Keir stood for leader, he said he was going to engage with members more and members would have more of a role. That's why people feel this is a bit of a step backwards, and he hasn't been really straight. So we're saying to him, look, get back on track. Forget these rule changes. Get on with the discussion about policy, and let's have a real discussion. The employment stuff was great. Lucy Powell's housing stuff was terrific. There's a lot more to go for now as well. In terms of the public schools VAT, that was one of our policies. Indeed. But you know, we had a wider policy, which was bring public schools into the state sector.
Basically abolish public.
Well, no, we were
going
to integrate them into the public sector, and that would have eventually meant there was no need for their existence.
Isn't the problem here, John McDonnell, that what Keir Starmer wants to do is to focus the Labour Party on what Labour voters think, rather than what Labour activists, who have a lot of time to go to meetings and argue the toss over this composite and that composite, and that what he's trying to do with this is to move the party over to thinking about Labour voters as opposed to Labour members.
There's always that issue about a political party's membership sort of isolating it to the wider community. That might happen if you had a small rump of a party. When you've got 500,000 members, that's impossible to do. That means we've got virtually a member on every street. But the key issue as well is how do you further engage those members in the wider community, right through community organising, all of those issues. And again, the community organising team has been laid off and sacked, completely unnecessary. So when Keir said, I want to engage with members more, I want members to have more of engagement in the party, we thought he was going down the path of making sure we broaden the membership up. I was aiming for 1 million members. We should be doing that, recruiting all the time, but opening up our doors so that people all have a say over the development of those policies. As soon as you start closing that down, for example, restricting their ability to select the leader or have a vote over the leader, effective vote over the leader, then you're cutting yourself out for the wider community.
Would you have used the words that Angela Rayner used last night?
Have you not heard some of my speeches, Trevor? It's important. Sometimes I embarrass myself.
They are required reading in my household, John, but I'm...
Look, I
would like you to share with the nation whether you would use those terms.
Well, we've all been there. We've all been there, late at night, getting very angry about what's going on. What I like about Angie Rayner is that she's human. She may well drop herself in it, just as I've done time and time again, but she's human, and she has human emotions. And when you get angry about something, sometimes the language that you use might be over the top. But what she's angry about, the issue we're all angry about. Let me just say this, Trevor. In my community at the moment, I've got large numbers of people who are fearful because they're going to lose £20 off their universal credit. They're going to be thrust into poverty with children. No wonder she's angry. So sometimes your language gets ahead of you, but deep down, she's expressing the anger that many of us feel.
So everybody now gets a free pass to say what they like about other people,
no. We all
because they're a bit, they're a bit emotional.
No, we have to be
late at night.
No, we have to be disciplined, and all of us have to bear that in mind. We need to bring people with us around and turn them off, but we're expressing human emotion here, and sometimes you don't get the language right. And some instances, though, actually, people forgive you for that because they know your intentions are good.
All right. Well, a theme this morning has been civility and respect, and you've been extremely respectful of your leader, whatever your private feelings are. The new leader of Unite, Sharon Graham, announced that she wouldn't be coming to conference, even though it's her first opportunity to demonstrate support for Sir Keir Starmer. A bit rude, or not?
No, not really. I've known Sharon. I've worked with Sharon over the years. She's been involved in some of the organisational disputes in my constituency, at Heathrow Airport, for example. She's been brilliant. Her job...
Yeah, but how hard could it be to turn up for the leader's speech?
She's got about 16 disputes going on at the moment. Her job is, at the moment, as she sees it, is to concentrate on her members who are struggling in this economic climate. So I can understand why she puts that as a priority, but she'll be engaged. Look, again, what Sharon has done...
Come on, you're genuinely saying that coming down to Brighton for Wednesday afternoon is going to make the difference in any of those 16 disputes?
I don't think it makes any difference.
This is a signal, isn't it?
No, I don't think it makes any difference to Keir, whether individual...
No, I'm not saying it makes a difference to Keir. What I'm saying is the union leaders, who are big figures in their own right, tend and historically have paid respect to the leader of the Labour Party,
Trevor,
and they turn up to his speech.
You're not with the game. What Sharon is about...
Right.
No, listen. What Sharon is about is saying, I'm a trade union general secretary, but I'm a member of a team. Her team is down here as a delegation. She has confidence in them. She's no longer boss politics. I have to order everything around. What she's doing is getting on with their job as she sees it, the priority in the industrial struggles that her workers are having, their living standards, their fight to keep their jobs and to fight to protect their families. That's what she's concentrating on. She said, I've got a good team in the delegation there. They'll manage all the decisions that have taken place. It's a democratic union. The positions that have been taken by the union, a number of issues, that delegation will vote accordingly. It's democracy.
John McDonnell, thank you very much indeed.
Trevor.
The health and social care sectors are facing a difficult winter. Cases are stacked up into the millions. COVID isn't beaten, and now there's the awkward issue of whether care workers should be compelled to have the jab as a condition of employment. And then there's the cut to universal credit. At the centre of many of these tricky issues are low-paid workers, represented by Britain's biggest union, Unison. Their General Secretary, Christina McAnea, is here, and she joins me. Thank you very much for getting into the seat so quickly. The conference is, of course, going to be talking a lot about this weekend's issues, but I want to, besides welcoming you to Sky News, I think it's the first time you've been on this programme, I want to start with the issue that is bread and butter for you. There are 40,000 workers, we think, probably in the health and social care sectors, who have not been vaccinated. The government, or are yet to be vaccinated, the government says that if people aren't vaccinated by November, they could lose their job. What's the union's position on the government's decision that vaccination should be a condition of employment?
We think it's wrong. I think it's the wrong thing to do. And when we've been speaking to our members who work in social care, and we're the biggest social care union, the vast majority of them, are vaccinated. And we've done everything we can as Unison to say to them, get vaccinated. These are the reasons why you should be vaccinated. And I think peer pressure can be a good way, and people giving them reassurance about what happened when they got vaccinated. I think going down the compulsion route is just counterproductive, and people who have genuinely got either conditions or concerns about why they can't be vaccinated or don't want to be vaccinated, at this point, given where we are in the pandemic, they'll just leave. They'll walk away from the job, and we're not unique in saying this. So it's the government that's out of step here. We're actually, saying the same thing as most of the providers are saying. And so we've said to the government, why are you doing it this way? There must be other things we can do. The sector's already in total crisis. It was in crisis before the pandemic, which just made it even. Then the pandemic made it so much worse. There's over, about 120,000 vacancies at the moment. It's
there'll be more
unbelievable.
There'll be more vacancies now, presumably, if people decide that they would rather not work than have the jab. And this is at the beginning of the winter.
Yeah.
Now, what is it that could be done about this?
So what we've said to the government is do more persuasion and actually find out why people aren't getting vaccinated. Now, there may be some reasons why certain people refuse to get vaccinated. There is still nervousness among groups, and you've got to give them full information about what happens when you get vaccinated and why it's a good thing to be vaccinated. There are some kind of basic issues that you could deal with as well. So many of them, as you know, Trevor, are low-paid workers. Many of them don't get paid sick pay when they're off sick, even with COVID-related illnesses. And they're worried that if they go and get a jab and they're unwell for a few days or even a week, they're off sick, they get no pay. So that's one issue. I'm not saying it's the major issue, but it's certainly one issue. Making it easier for people to get the jab, actually bringing them along with groups with other workers to say, this is what happened when I got vaccinated, this is what happened to me, this is why it's important. There's lots of persuasion you could do rather than coercion.
So, but of course, right now, there are tens of thousands who haven't even had the first jab, and unless the gap between first and second jabs is dramatically reduced, they won't be in a position by the November deadline.
Yeah.
If that happens, is that going to be a call for industrial action? I mean, how are you going to resolve this?
So we are looking at we're looking at legal advice and what we can do to support our members. We've got lots of advice out there. We've been contacting them directly. What we're saying, and we're talking to employers as well, saying, let's see if we can find a way through this. Is there something else we can do? Are there some other jobs they can be put in the meantime while we still try and persuade people to get this done? That actually sacking people is not a good idea, because it may be that once people have thought about it a bit more, they will come back. But as you say, if they can't hit that deadline, then that's it, they're out. And so we're trying to say to them and to the government, let's be a bit more flexible about this. And I think there's a terrible irony here, and the government are well aware of it, which is every time I've asked them, can we do something about low pay? Can we do something about improving standards and training for them? They say, can't do it, Christina. We have no levers because it's all mainly private and voluntary sector. The government can use levers when they want to do it, because they're clearly doing it for this.
OK, so we've got COVID. We've got the 20%, £20 a week cut in universal credit, which affects a lot of your members. You said that you think that this could be the year for industrial action. Now, back in 1979, it was your union, or the predecessor of Unison, that essentially led that winter of discontent. Are we heading for another winter of discontent?
Well, there's certainly a lot of discontent out there, but whether it will turn into full-scale industrial action, I don't know. That will be for our members to determine. We are out for consultation at the moment. We've just been consulting on the NHS pay offer.
Consultation on industrial action?
Well, an indicative ballot, it's called, so it's not a formal industrial action ballot. Which, as you know, is very restrictive because of the legislation that we've got. But we're consulting across loads of sectors. So our local government sector, health sector, our police staff members, all being consulted on what they think about the offer or lack of an offer that they've been given. Where will it lead? I don't know yet at this point in time. For example, in the NHS, There are 16 trade unions, and I used to be the lead negotiator for those unions, so I know how difficult it is to get consensus across them. But that's the aim, is to actually talk to the other unions in each of the sectors where we're the main union and see how far we can go down the road of getting some consensus for a plan of action, shall we say, going forward.
You are, I think, probably the first woman leader of Unison, if I'm not mistaken. 75% of your members are women. That reflects a wider trend in the trade union movement, which is now has more women members, and leader of the TUC is a woman and so on. Do you think that is going to lead to a change in the tactics and indeed the preoccupations, the agenda of the trade union movement?
I think it will present a different image of the trade union movement, without a doubt, as in, I think people will see us perhaps differently than, you know, and I'm not saying all leaders wear the kind of tub-thumping type of traditional image of a trade union leader. I mean, by no means are the male trade union leaders all like that. But
sorry to interrupt you, but it's very interesting. I think probably the best-selling novel of the year, Richard Osman's The Thursday Murder Club, has... You've read it, yeah. And it has a guy in it who is a retired trade union leader who is probably a mix of, I don't know, Ron Todd and the old T&G leader. Do you think that those days are over for that guy?
Yeah, I mean, I think especially because of the membership, I mean, and it varies across unions. I mean, I just look at my own union. In Unison, as you say, 75% women. A big percentage of ours do jobs like care workers, or they're nurses, or they're healthcare assistants, or you know, they're control room staff within police and ambulance centres. You know, there's a huge range of jobs, cleaners, caterers, etc. And I don't mean they're not militant. I don't mean they're not passionate about their rights. But I think they have a different way of expressing it, in a sense. And so that old image of, you know, a man in a donkey jacket or a high-vis vest standing around a brazier, I mean, that's not where our members are. Our members will take strike action. Our members will picket. They will you know, stand and demonstrate against unfairness and injustice. But I think they expect the leaders to be able to negotiate, to talk sensibly and express arguments on their behalf. And at the end of the day, they pay us, as the officials, to get deals. That's what my members ask me to do.
So, megaphones out. Thank you, Christine McAnea.
Thank you.
Now, we've been talking about the way that the Labour Party is trying to navigate its way on the path back to power in a landscape with echoes of the 1970s and the 1980s. Delegates could do worse than listen to some of the party's elder statespeople, including our next guest. Charles Clarke was a Labour councillor, worked as Chief of Staff to Neil Kinnock in opposition, became an MP himself, and served as Education Secretary and Home Secretary under Tony Blair. You could say he's seen it and done it all, and he joins us now. Charles Clarke, how do you think they're doing so far this weekend?
Well, first of all, Trevor, good morning. Nice to see you in a fresh Sunday morning. I think they're doing OK. I think politics has been exceptionally difficult in the time of COVID. This is the first really large person-to-person gathering that's taken place. There are many, many issues which need to be resolved. On some of them you've covered in this programme today. But I think they've put themselves up as a realistic alternative to the Conservatives, and that's what they need to be at this stage. They need to take it further now to really set out what the alternatives are. There's more work to do.
Well, I want to come to that, but if I may first deal with the issue of the moment. You were a minister for a long time. This weekend, the country faces a petrol crisis, prospects of shortages in the supermarket. You actually faced a rather more challenging set of crises as Home Secretary, the fuel duty crisis, foot and mouth, and when you were party chairman and so on. What would you be advising the Cabinet to be doing right now?
Get real, look at the absolute situation. In a sense, Grant Shapps got off a bit light. He's the puppet, and the puppet master, the organ grinder, is Priti Patel, the Home Secretary. The whole issue here is about the immigration criteria and under what basis you can give people the right to work in this country. Brexit made the decision clear. It wasn't the EU, it was the British government. So the question is, could this have been predicted? Well, yes, it could. You gave earlier today the example of Grant Shapps himself predicting it in August. So if it could be predicted, why didn't the weren't steps in place earlier? Secondly, why is it so few? We're talking about 4,000 or so road drivers when there are 100,000 drivers short, when we've got 13,000 drivers less than when we were last in the EU from the EU. And then finally, why only these sectors? Why only road drivers and poultry? What about care workers? You've been talking to Christina just now. There are significant shortages across the economy. The government has it in its power to resolve those questions right now. And Priti Patel has held out to say no change, no change, no change, no change, until yesterday morning when the Prime Minister overruled her and said they'd put in the scheme that they're announcing this morning. Too little, too late. You've got to face up to the issue, predict it, get on the case beforehand, and then pull out all the stops. At the moment, the government isn't pulling out any stops at all. It's various injunctions as to how people should behave. But the reality is, when we had those issues in autumn 2000 on the fuel drivers dispute, the foot and mouth crisis, we pulled out all the stops at that time, whatever problem was needed, including up to and including using the army if necessary to help move things forward. I don't see any evidence that Grant Shapps himself or his organ grinder Priti Patel are taking these issues at all seriously. And that's the core point.
Do you think Priti Patel is up to it?
Of course she isn't. She's been a hopeless Home Secretary, and she should have been sacked the last time round. All the commentators, just a couple of weeks ago, all the commentators rightly say that she's got some grip on Boris Johnson. He's frightened of her in the back benches or whatever it might be, which means she's unsackable as far as Boris Johnson's concerned. But her track record is appalling. It was appalling through COVID, in the whole way she dealt with policing, the civil liberties issue through COVID. It's appalling on immigration, crossing the channel. It's appalling on this issue now. She is the person who has the responsibility for the quotas of people allowed to get visas in this country and on what basis it is. She's deciding that. She's been overruled by the Prime Minister for this short announcement we've got this morning, but she is the person who's responsible. And people like Grant Shapps aren't calling the tricks at all. They're simply doing what she says.
Let's come back to Labour. You were Neil Kinnock's Chief of Staff at the time when the now very famous speech denouncing militant took place, or Kinnock delivered that speech. And you, in fact, had been in Liverpool trying to deal with the problem, as you saw it, of the far left, the militant, and so on. Now, it's pretty clear that the party leadership wants to try to tackle a similar problem now. If you were Neil Kinnock's Chief of Staff now, what would you be... Neil Kinnock, I beg your pardon. Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff now, what would you be advising him to do?
Firstly, you have to prepare in each case. In each area, its policy, its organisation, its communication, you have to prepare. That's what we did on Liverpool for that speech about militant that you referred to with Neil. That applies to the constitutional changes we're talking about. I'm in favour of what's going to go through today, I hope, because I think it's a step in the right direction. I think Keir's done well to put it on the agenda. But you've got to prepare very fully and very comprehensively. You can't just bounce it on everybody. Secondly, the outstanding issues that still remain. A large number of disciplinary cases in the Labour Party about anti-Semitism and so on. Thousands, I gather, still unresolved. I would say those have to be resolved and sorted out categorically. They can't hang about in all of these issues as they have to move forward. That's on the organisational side. On the policy side, you have to develop in each area of policy an alternative of what we would be doing, we Labour would be doing, were we in government now. So it's no good simply opposing by attacking the government and saying, you're a load of rubbish. They are a load of rubbish, but that's not enough. You've got to say, if we were there, we'd be doing this in a different way. Whether it's the migration dispute, whether it's what we're talking about today, the fuel drivers dispute or whatever. On every area, we have to say to the British people, there is a better way of doing this dealing with this problem, and we would be doing it in this way, on COP26 when it comes around, on security, the foreign policy issues, whatever it is. And that has to emerge weekly as it comes through. It's not a great policy for the future, it's a sense of what the Labour alternative is.
We get the sense that, I get the sense that you don't think that actually that's what we're getting this weekend. Instead, what we are probably going to get is 24 hours of conversation about the word scum. Now, you've just used the word rubbish about government. Do you think that that kind of language helps in any way?
In general, no. And I try and censor myself sometimes unsuccessfully on those kinds of things. But I don't think that's the right way to proceed. But I think it is fair for an opposition to say, is the government competent in dealing with this question? So in the case of what we're just talking about now, is the government competent in dealing with the migration issue, with the fuel dispute issue or whatever? If it's not competent, we should draw attention to it.
But this is I'm really asking a question about the way that politics is projected. This is going to hang over the Labour leadership for some time, isn't it? Is the Deputy Leader a person that you can trust to put out there?
She certainly is. I think it may hang over. It depends what people like you and how people like you talk about it. I wasn't aware about it till I heard it, you mention it on this programme today. It's not an enormous issue. As I'm sure Angela herself would say today, it's not the right way to conduct yourself in these circumstances, and she'd seek to control herself in a way that ensured that bad language of that kind, or my use of the word rubbish, is not used, because that's a bad way of conducting politics. But I don't think it's the central question. The central question is, what are the policies government actually doing, and what should Labour be offering as an alternative?
Charles Clarke, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's it from me this week. There will be much more from the Labour conference in a moment. We'll be talking to Sam Coates in The Take to analyse what we've heard this morning. So coming up after the break, the legendary Sam Coates.